Hello, welcome to Graceful Embroidery. Today in my studio I am stitching out a new crazy quilt block, and for the first time ever I'm actually stitching it out in my new Husqvarna 260mm square hoop. Now, as you can see, I'm stitching it out on ivory silk dupion. I've been very organised. I have the 5 pieces of fabric already, and something new to the crazy quilts I've not done before. When you get the box of basting stitches, which shows you the shape and actually attaches your fabric, in this case silk dupion, to the 2 layers of stitch and tear, I've actually put inside that basting block, there's a little template of all the different sections. I don't know why I've never done this before, but it suddenly occurred to me this morning to add that feature. The first section down here is stitched on the fabric and no fabric is attached, and as you can see I've done an ivory motif fill on here. Then I've attached this beautiful silk here. This is my favourite silk. It is actually the silk that is the background of my website. The website developer took a picture of the silk because it's just so beautiful. It's slubby and it's shot. It's got 2 sort of a gold and a olive, very pale olive green. And I've done the motif fills on that section. Now I'm going to add some decorative stitches down the middle here to cover up the join. But when they're finished, you'll see that there's a gap, and I'll show you later on what's going to go in that gap. Right, that's that done. You will find when you stitch out these blocks that there are lots of guidelines everywhere, probably more than is necessary, and I'm not stitching out every one because obviously I know what's happening with each. The next thing we're going to add is a strip down here, and I've chosen an antique ivory for that. Now, the lovely thing about silk dupion, you can use the lines on it as guidance for stitching things correctly, getting them in line. Now, sometimes when you're doing these romantic crazy quilts, it's possible to do the trimming in situ, but not for this one because it's such a large hoop. You will notice, if I can just scroll it in, I want to show you a new feature which I've not had on my blocks before. This, in fact, I've used the guidance stitches for this, and you'll notice here there's a tiny little arrow or line of stitching pointing in that direction. I've been known when I've been attaching fabric sections, and especially the first one, that can easily go wrong. It just shows you which direction it's going to be folded in after it's stitched, and I've introduced that on this block for the first time. Now I've got my fluorescent-y fabric glue pen here, and I'm going to, because I've got these bits marked out, it's very easy to see where to put the glue, and sometimes I put too much on and put it on the next section. I'm just going to pick those little bits away, and I'm going to take it back to the current stitch position. When your glue's in place, you very carefully, and you've trimmed it, you very carefully push this over, and it's easier to do it when when you've got the machine embroidery unit underneath the fabric. But iron it from the fold this way, and the next stitches will hold it all in place. So I've tried to make them all start at the bottom on this hoop, on this design I mean, and you can smooth as you go, but don't go too quickly. Right, this is the box of stitches that will hold it all in place. Goes into the corner there, and see I'm ironing it with my finger, keeping it well clear of the and another lot coming down there, and as you can see that did the little stitches that point out to show you the direction for the next piece of fabric that I will add. I'll take it to the trim position so you can see that. There we are. So there's the little stitch that shows you that the next piece of fabric has got to go over there. And I've got to trim round, and I just trim right tight up against that. It's only a guideline there for you, it doesn't matter, it's all going to be hidden. I've done it in such a way that nothing will show. I'm going to take this off the hoop. I have to move the tripod to do that and trim it, and then I'll bring it back. That piece of fabric has been trimmed now, and you'll notice down here that I very carefully left this bit hanging over. I made a horrendous mistake when I was doing the smaller version of this the other day, and when I put this next section on here I trimmed it right up close, which is not a good idea. You always want a good inch around, unless you really know what you're going to do with the block when it's finished. It just gives you lots of flexibility. I'll remove that little piece of fluff there. When you're doing these crazy quilt blocks, probably the best thing to do is to have your laptop or computer, if possible, alongside the machine so that you can move from each stitch and see what you're doing. One of the things I have noticed is that most of my designs they don't have bright colours, so sometimes it's not always easy to see on the screen of your machine exactly what's going to be stitched next. My next piece of fabric is this lovely green silk dupion. It's got some very big slubs in it. It is green and gold, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Many years ago I made a Mother of the Bride outfit with it, and I've got heaps of it, and I suddenly thought, oh, I must dig deep and get that green out for today. I'm going to stitch the securing stitches for this fabric, and then I should be back. If you do find when you're stitching these out that one of the fabric pieces is not quite right, then just take the hoop off and carefully remove it again. As you can see, this is when this goes over. We're going to have the slubs going diagonally across, which is lovely. But if you found when you did this it was a little bit off centre, then you can easily remove it with a stitch ripper and redo it again. If in doubt, check everything. Do when you're stitching these out. You can't rush this process when you're attaching the fabric samples. And as you see, I just lay them on the top, and the machine happily catches them. I'm keeping an eye. I'm using my hands to smooth them. You could attach them with a little bit of masking tape or something, but I find for these smallish pieces of fabric it's not an issue. Right, I've trimmed that fabric, and as you can see I've attached my glue, and I know it looks blue, it looks awful, but if you're putting it on pale fabric it won't show through, it fades. It comes from a company called Sewline, and there are links to it on my website and with the PDF which will come with these designs. So now we're going to stitch the securing stitches, and once again they will show you the direction where the next fabric is going to go. And it's just important that that's nice and flat. I decided with this section here, Because I was using a shot silk which has got a little bit of gold in it, I dismissed the colour that's meant to be used for the design, and I used a gold to emphasise the silk, and I think you'll agree that that looks good. It is important that you're aware of the stitches and what colour they are and what they're going to stitch out on, especially when you're doing the outline stitches. With some colours, you know, if you use white and you attach a purple fabric, when you fold it over, you can sometimes see the stitches. So you've just got to be aware of how best your placement guideline stitches are going to blend in with the fabric. Now I've just done 2 more lots of stitches. There's a motive fill which goes motive stitch that goes down each side of this panel, and also a satin border that goes on there, and I've done that. So our next bit of fabric goes across here and creates another panel that cuts across the design. So I'll stitch that and come back, and then we have one more piece to add and some motive stitches to go in that, and then the block is complete and ready for the embroidery. I had just trimmed along here, which I'd failed to do. I know I've got lots of fabric over here, but I'll trim that off later and make sure I've got a nice border all the way around. But I hadn't trimmed this bit here, which obviously is necessary. Right, I've trimmed that fabric and I've ironed it over with my fingers and flattened it, ready for the securing stitches. There, I've trimmed that and it's all ready. You don't have to worry too much when you've got, there are certain places like here where you've got 2 layers of fabric under that little seam. You can cut one shorter than the other one so that they're not sitting out too proudly. A lot depends on the fabric you're using. And this is my last bit, which goes on there, and once again I'm going to look at the lines on this to position it nicely. I'll stitch that down and then do the motifs. Silk does tend to fray, and when you cut it, if you're cutting slightly across it, you get little bits stick out. Just make sure that they haven't built up too much, and remove as many of those as you can. So this bit's going to fold right up into this corner, which is the 6th section of the design. I'll fold that over, and once again iron it away from yourself as much as possible, and make sure it's nicely secure right into the corner of the hoop there. That's the motive stitching done now on that last section, and so the block is complete now. It has all the fabric in place in readiness for the embroidery.